Thank you. All right, we'll review the minutes from the previous meeting and let me know if there's any discussion. If not, we can move to approve them.
I would like to make a motion that we approve the minutes from last meeting and that they be placed in the archives of the Duncanville Parks and Recreation Board.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second. I second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. We'll move to any board member announcements. Anybody have anything?
I'll speak on just our last Friday when we had our parade and tree lighting. It was an excellent turnout. It was so good to see the community come out and see so many smiles. We got to walk if we wanted to, or ride in the trailer that was provided by our former board member Reggie. And the trailer looked really good. We were told that because we were part of the city that we couldn't win the prize, but I felt like our float looked the best. And it was good to be around people and just to have that positive atmosphere. And the tree lighting went off without a hitch. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, lights on. Yeah. That was the part that I was worried about. And it worked. So just wanted to make sure that I said thank you to the Parks and Rec Board, to the streets for setting everything up and cornering everything out for us, making everything safe for us and for our citizens.
I would like to add to that. It was a great experience, especially being first year on the board. Loved the fact that we had so many participants. Enjoyed even the presentations or performances by the children. It was very great to see that aspect of it. And the vendors, everything actually just went very well. Looking forward to next year, as well as having more candy. I learned a lot about that. Yes. It's wonderful to see so many kids out there, and I didn't realize it. So this being the first, that 4 bags of candy would be great per vehicle, knowing that when you turn that corner, it is going to be amazing. So it was definitely a great experience. So, and the Parks and Rec guys did a wonderful job. So thank you. And as well as, let's note, the city looks beautiful, the parks look beautiful, the lights look beautiful, because we did make our way through the park at some point that evening. So
everything was really good. I hate Noel's not here to hear it, but his team did an amazing job. It was a lot of people, so we had a really good time. And thank you everybody on the board that came out and participated. Any other board member announcements? Beth, you have anything? Okay.
I'd like to say that I saw the trailer and it did look nice. I apologize that I wasn't able to attend as I was not here in this state, but it looked like you all did a wonderful job in decorating that. I really liked the way it looked. And I did take a drive through on Sunday, yesterday, and looked at all the decorations that were set up, and everything looks really nice. I do plan to take advantage of it this week. So wonderful job.
Thank you. Okay, staff reports.
Yeah, so for November, there was 1 arrest, 7 reports, 0 citations issued, 8 field identifications, 268 calls for service, and 179 extra patrols, and 15 city ordinance violations. I think really the only incident of note was over at Ebert Park earlier. Take that back. Actually, I think it was like the very beginning of December. But anyways, there's somebody that's gone over there in the field out there, and they'll go out there and they'll start shooting rounds out in the parking lot. And fortunately, the neighbors across the street, they caught it, but like their camera would have caught it, but they didn't have their cameras working, so we weren't able to capture it. But something to keep an eye out for.
Thank you. Recent upcoming events.
So yeah, I too want to make a couple of comments about the Christmas parade. Kudos to Mo and his team. And also I want to say thank you to all the departments who are such a huge support for this event. Obviously our police department, our public works department, PIO, fire department gets involved. I mean, everyone gets involved. It's really a team effort. So even though a lot of times Parks and Rec gets a lot of the thanks and the kudos, it really is all the departments that come together to pull it off. It's a big event. And it really went well this year, even though we had to move the date. And so with that, I'll segue into, I hope that we have to have another parade here in a few weeks for football team. We'll see what happens this Saturday after that. So we also had a Parents Day Out event, I guess the day before, last Thursday. We had about 20 kids, I think, participate. This is the first time we've done this event in a really long time. We brought it back after a long hiatus. And so we're hoping to grow that event as well to provide an opportunity for parents to go out and shop with their kids or have a date night in early December. So we'll bring that back again. So that's all I have at this time. Bond projects, I'll start off with the best news of all. You know, I've been saying for a really long time at all these meetings that there's been no change. Well, we've had a change. We finally got the grant paperwork for Armstrong Park. That has been received. It has been signed off by our city manager, Aretha Farrell-Benavides, and has been returned to Texas Parks and Wildlife. And so as soon as they give us the final go to move forward, which is expected anytime, we can go ahead and start the procurement process. So we have cleared the last big hurdle for the Armstrong Park project. The citizens have been so patient working through this grant issue that we've dealt with, with COVID and National Park Service and all the things we've dealt with. But we think there's a light at the tunnel, and we're going to be starting this project very shortly. And so hopefully we'll see present to the council, hopefully at one of the meetings in January, give them a refresher on the project itself, just to kind of remind. We have some new council members since they've last seen it. So we want to, so that when the procurement process comes through for purchase, they'll know what it's going to be, and we'll have a lot of questions. But that's where we're at on the project. And so all the others are pretty much status quo, but great progress on our Armstrong Park. The grant was almost $750,000, and so that's a huge benefit for our community, because that will allow us to spend those bond dollars that were approved in 2018 on additional improvements for either Armstrong or additional improvements to some of our other parks. They will be used in parks as part of the project. And the Small Bikes on Trails pilot program, I'm going to give the board an update that I did a short presentation for the council at their last meeting about your proposed pilot program. I want to know it was received very well. It has some very valid questions. One being we want to address skateboards, skates, skating, those types of things. We'll talk about it later on in the agenda, but we do have a joint meeting with the council set for our January time date. And so at that meeting, we're planning on putting on the agenda for both the board as well as the council to talk about some of those fine details of the pilot program moving forward this spring. They were supportive of that, but we'll work out some of the details at that January meeting with the council and then move forward this spring with the pilot program. So that's where we are.
Sorry, I have a question. As it relates to the Armstrong Park after procurement, what does the timeline looks like from, I guess?
There'll be a period of time which the contractors will have to mobilize and get their things together, get everything ordered. So I wouldn't anticipate any kind of real activity happening, 4 or 5 weeks maybe after we actually procure it. There has to be some contract signed and those types of things. But, it'll take a little bit of time, but the good news is coming. Good question.
the only thing that moving back to 3, I forgot for board member announcements is Councilman Cooks held a chair meeting of all the boards and commissions this past Saturday. And I was a part of that, and the other boards were excited to learn about some of the things we do. Some of the citizens did have some questions for us, which I'll talk about later in our upcoming calendar. So some of the citizens did have questions about parks, but it was a good meeting, a lot of questions, and a lot of things that they didn't know we did. And they're like, y'all are a busy board. And I said, yes, we are. So I wanted to go back to that. Next, we'll go ahead and receive and discuss the lab property.
So just I'll introduce our presenter here. As everyone's well aware, I'm sure that there's been a lot of public discussion about the lab property here in Duncanville. And Councilmember Kuntz has reached out to the National Audubon Society and has asked that Mr. Brian Trusty here come present to the board some information about nature preserves, how the National Audubon Society works, and how they can perhaps assist the city in any kind of possible future endeavors. So with that, this is Brian Trusty. He is the Vice President of Operations or something like that.
Yeah, where do you want me to speak from?
Oh, wherever you like to speak, I do have it. You got it. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Again, my name is Brian Trusty. I'm a Vice President of Audubon Center Operations, the National Audubon Society. I'm here at the invitation of Bart and, of course, Council Member Jeremy Kuntz to talk to you about a couple of things, but primarily about the value of natural areas in urban communities. I come to you with wearing a couple of different hats this evening. And it's a pleasure to be with you all this evening, so thank you for having me. Not just from the Audubon Society and the role that I have there. I've been with Audubon for a little over 9 years. I started as the state director for the Texas program back in late 2012. A couple of years later, the organization asked me to take on a regional vice president role where I managed this region of 11 states for a number of years. And then they asked me to unify and strengthen the network of 33 nature centers and 28 wildlife sanctuaries that Audubon operates across the country. So I have a rich and deep history, specifically in natural areas, operating parks, park management, park system management, but also, local and large landscape scale conservation initiatives. I have another hat on that I'm representing today as well, which is a little bit unique, and that is I have the honor of serving as the chair of the Texas State Parks Advisory Board for Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. I've been in that role now for 8 years, where I primarily advise state parks and the Texas Parks and Wildlife on how we can continue to evolve our state park system to meet that rapidly changing needs and demands of our state. And I've also had the privilege recently, of course, of playing a key role in envisioning and resourcing the Centennial Plan, because our state park system turns 100 in 2023. And in that conversation, why that's relevant to this discussion tonight, we've talked a lot about the impressive and substantial demand we see for natural areas and open spaces in Texas state parks. I know most of our state parks are located way outside of town. We do have a few jewels that are in town, such as Cedar Hill State Park, which remains one of our most heavily visited parks. But on busy peak weekends, we oftentimes will see a line of cars that's over a mile long out on the road trying to get into the park. And that's the pent-up demand that people really have for open space and natural areas. And one of the conversations that we've had in planning the 100-year anniversary of our state park system is also to recognize the value of partnerships with local municipalities and county systems to be able to bring nature home where people live in their hometown. It helps deal with that demand. And we did see, of course, as you might expect, a huge uptick in demand during COVID. As people, it was one of the few things people felt safe doing, is getting outdoors. So today I'm going to talk to you about the value of natural areas in urban spaces. We're going to start off first with some level setting about what exactly is a nature preserve or a natural area in this context. So these are primary, whether they're state, just like your other parks types in a park system that range from pocket parks to regional parks, natural areas can also range very widely in terms of its size, from something fairly small to something like Cedar Ridge Preserve that's fairly large and expansive. Regardless of its size, these are spaces that are set up primarily to protect the flora, fauna, and unique physical, natural elements, attributes of the site. Sometimes there's also cultural resources that are part of the stewardship responsibility. They tend to have fairly low intensity maintenance requirements compared to other traditional parks. Not to say their maintenance is zero, because it's not, but it is just really about keeping up with and maintaining what limited amount of infrastructure they have on the site. And it tends to be fairly limited. That's the point. It's trying to keep it in a natural state. So there's not a lot of mowing, there's not a lot of seeding or fertilizing. There's not a lot of taking care of ball fields or courts and things like that, which is a big part of the maintenance responsibilities of the rest of the park system. So this is a little bit of animal of different nature. These are sites that tend to host primarily a lot of self-guided experiences, when folks going out and doing all sorts of diverse usage, from walking on trails to birding to other forms of wildlife viewing, and sometimes even just taking the time to sit quietly in the outdoors and soak everything in. Oftentimes too, programming at these sites are not always necessarily to be provided by the city themselves or whoever is managing the site. It's a space that's very popular for other entities to come in and partner with the community to do programming on site. A good example is Cedar Ridge Preserve, which is actually a Dallas County property that has an agreement with our local chapter, Dallas Audubon, to manage it. So, and I'll get into, when I talk a little bit about Audubon and the potential of working with organizations like this, I'll explain our complicated nature. But we are made up of both local chapters and a national organization. So these can be great assets within the community. In framing the conversation around the value of natural areas, I'm going to be really talking about three different dimensions. One is ecosystem services, two is economic benefits of natural areas in urban spaces, and three is quality of life. So first, starting with ecosystem services. These are sites that actually can assist the larger public works responsibility of managing stormwater and water quality. As mentioned earlier, I think we're talking about trees. We also see contributions to air quality. It helps to mitigate heat island effect, which large urban areas tend to develop, and they can serve as a carbon sink. One of the things that's most important to me as a part of National Audubon is also the role and value it plays in protecting and bolstering biodiversity. Our urban spaces, and we've had conversations within our organization about sometimes without these types of spaces, our large urban areas like Dallas-Fort Worth are quickly becoming ecological monocultures, where we are starting to see fewer and fewer diversity, particularly in birds, where now, if you're living in a heavily urbanized space, you may see a house sparrow, a pigeon, a grackle, maybe a buzzard here and there. And so seeing raptors, seeing songbirds and other types of species oftentimes becoming less and less and less because that habitat's not available to them. So being able to actually continue to build up habitat reserves within a community, it's important to have natural areas like this for pollinators, seed dispersal, and also soil health. There's been a lot of research about the economic value of green spaces. And of course, I know your park professionals know this already about the economic value of park systems, period. But there is a unique aspect too about the economic value that comes from natural areas specifically. There's a lot of research done by John Compton at Texas A&M. I actually studied under him in my master's program about the proximal increase of property values that based on proximity to green space and open areas, and also trails. So there's been a lot of research, not just anecdotal, but hard quantitative fact finding about how natural areas like this can increase property value of neighboring properties. It can also be a strong economic attractor for residents, for places people may be looking to relocate to live, businesses, employers may be looking at new places to bring their businesses to, and to the comment made earlier about people and their mobility traveling around, to tourism. Whether it's friends that are coming in from Plano or Louisville or Lancaster or even Ennis to come and experience a unique park, oftentimes they're also going to spend money in the community while they're there, whether it's gasoline or food or what have you. So they can play a great role in tourism. Aside from the obvious benefits of community beautification, and then of course also what's an important aspect is the equity and environmental justice angle, but making sure that the entire community has strong access and equitable access to green spaces and open spaces, so they can enjoy them. So now moving on to quality of life. There's also been a tremendous amount of research regarding the health benefits of natural areas like this on stress reduction, anxiety reduction, also just exercise of folks getting out and walking. I may not be interested in playing basketball or playing tennis, or I'm not on a soccer team, but I will get out and I'll walk on the trails. So there's been a lot of research around the importance of the health benefits of natural spaces. It's also a place that stimulates art, whether it's performance art. We've seen that happen a lot, oftentimes in places, in open spaces that have an amphitheater venue or something like that, but also visual arts as well. It's important too for folks to feel the access and have real access to the outdoors and natural settings in their hometown, not just something that they have to get into a car and drive to. It can be a tremendous educational asset to local clubs, youth service organizations, public schools, private schools, who may want to come out and use the site to be able to integrate nature education and conservation education into their curriculum. And then, of course, it tends to also always be a strong source of community pride. So there are a lot of communities that are really doubling down on intentionally bringing green spaces and open spaces into their community. I listed just a couple here that you're likely to be familiar with. So your, I think, neighbor or close neighbor in Cedar Hill a number of years ago, when they did their master plan, committed that they were going to have 30% of the land mass within their city's boundary to remain as undeveloped green space. And they, as you can see, the trail systems that they're putting in are also working to link all those things. We have an Audubon Center in Cedar Hill, right next door to Cedar Hill State Park. It's the Dogwood Canyon Audubon Center. And that was a part of that vision. That came about as a part of the city's vision to do exactly that, to protect that land. I've been working recently with the city of Louisville and Donna Barron, the city manager up there, and the city council, who Louisville is one of the larger communities and suburbs within the DFW metro area. And it has a little bit of a history and a reputation of being fairly industrialized. And what they wanted to do was completely actually rebrand their community with their recent master plan. And so they actually, the big driving force behind the entire master plan is something they're calling the green centerpiece. They even actually changed their logo of their city to a sparrow or a barn swallow. So that they see the value in rebranding around the accessibility of open space and the prominence of open space in the community. And then here's one further south you may or may not be aware of, and that's Flugerville, which is just north of Austin. They've just wrapped up their 2030 plan. And one of the first things it mentions in the vision statement of their 2030 plan is that the underpinning of this plan really is based in first-rate parks and open spaces and trails. It goes on to say also schools and a few other things. But as a parks person, it was nice to see the top three mentions be parks, open spaces, and trails. And of course, it's not lost on us that the image that they're portraying in the cover of their master plan is that of an open space. So these are communities that are starting to really recognize all the benefits, the myriad of benefits that come with having natural and open spaces in their towns, and they're starting to leverage it. So now what I'm going to share with you is a few examples of natural areas in the area. I'm just going to kind of scroll through them, and I'm going to show you some images of potential amenities that natural areas can play host to. Some of these may be familiar to you, and some of them may be new. If you see something new, I highly recommend you get out and take an opportunity to go visit them. So here's the Mockingbird Nature Park in Midlothian, and it's possible Jeremy Kuntz weed-eated that trail. I don't know. I know he's weed-eating the trails out of the Ladd property. There's the Bear Creek Preserve in Lancaster, also a very popular site. Cedar Ridge Preserve in Dallas, which we've already talked about, is managed by our local chapter. Windmill Hill Preserve in DeSoto, also a great natural space. Dogwood Canyon, which we've talked about, it's our Audubon Center there in Cedar Hill. And then I added this one in there as well, which is the Arbor Hills Nature Preserve in Plano. I actually live in far north Dallas, but this is the closest natural area to where I live. And it is hard to find a parking space in this place sometimes because it's so popular. So there is opportunity to be able to not just have a natural area be kind of a little bit of a one-trick pony, but also to link it together with along the creek to a 10-mile creek to create more of a linear park and a green belt. And the lab property, which specifically we wanted to talk a little bit about the opportunity that the city of Duncanville has to have a more intentional point of view around the lab property and what it can be in the future. The lab property would be kind of the anchor tenant of this, as it's, I don't know if we have a laser here, do we yet? As you can see, it doesn't really show up. It's on the far left corner, the far left terminus of that potential greenbelt opportunity. Natural areas can have outdoor classrooms that are not heavily developed, not necessarily heavy infrastructure on the land, but just places where people can gather and participate in programming. You can have things like a butterfly garden, again, oftentimes managed and maintained by partner groups within the community, not necessarily falling on the shoulders of the Parks Department. You can have boardwalks if you have low-lying areas or marshes that you would like to be able to protect, but still allow people to be able to access. That can also play host to viewing platforms and interpretive opportunities. You can have places like a sensory garden, which is actually just a quiet place people can sit and enjoy the various senses that come to play. As we mentioned earlier, it can also have an amphitheater. When we think of an amphitheater in a natural space, we're not talking about something that's fairly large and got a lot of infrastructure around it, but something that's simple, where folks can have presentations, programs. I've even seen park systems do concerts in the park, movies in the park, things like that, in places like this. You can, of course, I'm a birder, so I like to see things like a bird blind, where folks can get out and witness wildlife. We can have really low-key picnic areas where folks can also use the space for those more traditional recreation activities. And of course, one of the most common and most popular amenities are trails. We can even have more built landscapes like this, such as this is an example of a tree house or a nature play area, which could be, you know, anything you want it to be. But we've installed a nature play area at Dogwood Canyon. It's become very popular amongst families to be able to come out and bring their kids and spend a little bit of time out there in the outdoors and a playground that's not so traditional. So that's my fairly rapid fire presentation around the value of nature and natural areas and open spaces in the community and what's possible about a site like the lab property. I was also just wanted to mention organizations like Audubon would easily partner with the city to be able to program it. And not just National Audubon Society, National Audubon Society is the overarching governing body of our network of affiliate chapters, which we have state programs that deliver programs on the ground locally, but we also have our local chapters. That's how Audubon was created back in 1905. And so each of our chapters are independent 501c3s. And so Dallas Audubon, that manages Cedar Ridge Preserve, is a fairly robust chapter made up of several thousand members. They also can provide programming, whether it's bird walks or nature talks or what have you. So there's a whole host of opportunities to partner with organizations like Audubon to be able to bring and add value to a site like this. So with that, I'm going to close my presentation and then just be available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Gordy, any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
All right. Once an area has been designated as a preserve, about how long does that designation last? Is it something that is going to be years long, decades long, or just?
It's really up to you. I mean, the designation as a preserve is really up to your own policies and practices and how you view that site in the larger family of your park system. And so, you know, typically, if once a site is designated as a nature preserve, it tends to remain that indefinitely, unless there becomes an alternative use for the site that the city collectively decides is a better use. But yeah, it's really up to you. There's no policy requirement or anything like that. Now, if you are looking at a site that you may want to put a conservation easement on, or there may be an entity that wants to put a conservation easement on it, those tend to be termed. So they tend to be around 10 years. That's where a foundation or a nonprofit organization or a philanthropist may basically pay the city or pay the landowner to not develop the site. And that's what the conservation easement is. There are a lot of, I heard you talk about the Texas Parks and Wildlife grant earlier in the meeting. There's a lot of grant opportunities through Parks and Wildlife and through other entities, including national and federal entities, to be able to support natural area development and open space development as well.
Mr. Trustee, I assume that you've been at the lab property
I have.
before. So the area that's from, I guess, Danville Road north to the creek.
Right.
I mean, obviously it was built or used as something previously as, like farming or something. Would you guys suggest or recommend that being restored to native prairie, or what would you envision something like that?
Absolutely. So this part of the world is home to an ecosystem or habitat type called blackland prairie. And blackland prairie happens to be the most endangered ecosystem in all of North America. So there's less than 1/10 of 1% of the original blackland prairie that exists today, most largely because of agriculture development and urbanization. So this would be a natural place to look at doing blackland prairie restoration. Prairie restoration can be expensive though, so it could be something that you just phase and take over time. It's also something that you could usually find grant support to do. And one thing to remember is that native prairie, particularly blackland prairie, isn't what people usually envision when they think of a prairie. It's messy. I mean, it's got a lot of different plant types, and it's not a manicured English style lawn, right? So it looks a little messy. So sometimes we've advised communities, they do prairie restoration, and instantly the phones start ringing with, you need to get out there and mow that. That looks terrible. It's like, well, no, that's what it's supposed to look like, which is also an opportunity to educate people about what our native landscapes really are.
We do have a couple of members from our KDB board. Okay. They're interested in doing some prairie restoration, especially at one of our other parks.
Oh, excellent.
So I want to throw that out there because if you have any calculations for grants, we are looking for grants for that as well.
Yeah, I can try to brainstorm with you.
Yeah.
Great. Any other questions?
Well, I don't know if it's a question to you or not, but is the land property in trouble or something? Is someone saving it? What?
No, there's just discussion about how it should be developed in the future, and there's an ongoing, obviously, a community groundswell, system groundswell to try to preserve it and create a nature preserve with it as opposed to developing it into something different other than what it is today.
What is it today?
Today it is just property that's owned by the city. There is a portion of it on the north side of the creek. I think it's still owned by the original owners. But the majority of it is owned by the city, and it's not designated as parkland currently. So it's not parkland, but it is owned by the city, and the city's just trying to decide how we're going to develop it in the future. Do we want to preserve it, or do we want to do something with it?
It was gifted to the city with some stipulations as well.
What are those stipulations?
I don't have all those in front of me. I do know that it needs to be used for, Mr. Coons could probably speak to it better than I can.
For cultural.
Cultural, that's what I was looking for. Yeah.
Cultural education, artistic purposes. It says primarily used.
Yeah.
That was 1990.
Is that property north of the creek?
South.
No, but
Well, there's a bit north. Yes, it does go beyond the creek, but
would that be available at any point to incorporate into it? We got it from the original.
well, even the portion that the city owns is also north of the creek currently. But the property that is owned by the owner is the northwest corner, I guess.
So where that chain gate is, where it's chained off on Cedar Hill Road, that's city property?
That's the
That's
city
it.
side.
What city do you okay?
It's easy to get lost down there, not realize you're in the city.
Oh, I live across the street from it.
Yeah.
Walk over.
So it doesn't have parking and it would be, I'm just my guess thinking of the preserve. I've seen driving by this location, of course, but how would that work incorporating parking and something like that? Would it still look natural, but still have, okay.
Yeah, you could do what you want to do, but my recommendation, you need to put a parking infrastructure in there.
Right.
If you were going to use it and open it up to the public for that use, but to do it with impervious surfaces. So you're not necessarily creating a big paved parking lot, but it's a natural space. And so it's natural people would expect to have a gravel parking lot or something like that. You lower it.
I will say I've been to Cedar Hill Dogwood Canyon a lot over the years and watched it grow naturally. So, and it's a nice park. So when you said parking, I know the parking there is gravel and it just, lends itself its own way.
That's right.
So,
Well, I think there's the wintergreen location that was paved now. Is that a correct statement?
What's that?
The wintergreen,
Windmill.
sorry, it's on the location, it's at the corner of Wintergreen and Main, it's actually paved, so that's why I asked the question, trying to have an They just did it with all the construction.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, go ahead. No, Ben, I think Ben has something.
I mean, what's the process of getting, does this have to go to city council?
Well, I think today was just a presentation
It's
to
a
give you
presentation.
about the benefits of preserving natural open space. Ultimately, this is really is a council decision. I don't know how much the park will be involved. That's something yet to be determined, and it probably depends on what kind of direction the council wants to go. But I know Mr. Coombs was really interested in getting the park board involved and making sure you guys were aware of kind of benefits of what the nature preserve can provide to the community.
So the takeaway that we would have to find grants or something before going to the board. I mean, going to the
Not
council.
necessarily. I think it's just ultimately the next step would be for the council to make the decisions as to what they want to do with the property.
Do we have a time frame?
I do not know a time. I don't think there is a time. I don't think there's a time frame at this point.
I think it was more informational for the Park and Rec Board, as Councilman Coons is shaking his head to make sure we're all aware of the lab property, what some of the ideas and plans are for it.
So we do have a joint meeting with the city council, as I mentioned previously. This might be one of the items just discussed at the meeting, perhaps. I'll be working with the city manager on developing that agenda in the near future. So this could be something we discuss about.
I want to ask the question. The city owns the land.
Correct.
And I could have the wrong group, but is there not another department also who's looking at this land? Meaning planning, any other planning department that's looking at this land for the purpose?
Well, there has been some, I guess, discussion in our planning department about what it could be. There's been some options thrown out there. It's being partially developed as partial commercial, partial residential. Now the creek corridor will always have to remain as is. There's a you get into floodplain issues that can't be developed. So that will always remain in this current state, more or less, because that can't be developed. But the land on either side could be, because it is out there. There's a pipeline through there as well, yes. So there'll be restrictions in that pipeline.
And the city owns multiple plots of land throughout the city. A more recent one would be the old Toyota property up on the I-20 service road. So there's different lots that, this is one of the larger plots of land that is available that does not have a current designation as to what they are looking to use it for necessarily. It's not been made clear. Because it has to be respectful of obviously the terms of the donation of it to the city too, and following that. So.
I have one other question too. If we were to move in the direction of, doing an Audubon preserve or anything, would we initiate that and send it to the council, or will we have to wait on the council's direction?
Come from the council.
Council. We can say we can support or not, but it will come from them first. If the board decided to support. Any more questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate you.
You're welcome to stay, or y'all can be dismissed.
13-year-old daughter.
You go ahead. Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, let me know if you have any other questions.
Okay, thank you. The next,
No, close the door.
If y'all would leave that door open.
You can leave it open.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is to talk about our goals and upcoming joint meeting with the city council we're talking about. So we need to talk about some of our 2020 plans and what we want to talk about with the council. We talked about adding bikes, the trails to the agenda. The biking and trails to the agenda potentially. I know we talked to them about that last time. And so they might ask for an update on the trail pilot program and some of the feedback you brought back from that. Any other ideas?
Going back to the biking and trails, which I'm clear that we're talking about the future phases of, you know, we got phase one now, the loop trail. One of our previous meetings, y'all kind of done on that, doing what's phase two look like. Is that what we're talking about?
I think that's what we probably
make sure the county council's on board with that. We're ready for phase two. Are you guys okay if that's moving forward?
Are you good to present that? Okay, and bring the thing, because I'm sure it's probably going to come back up. The council has a potential to ask about dog parks. I think one of the councilmen that's currently still on there likes to ask about that, and we haven't put any more energy beside into dog parks right now.
Been any more?
I just know that could potentially come up.
Sure, it's kind of one of those.
Those hanging.
Yeah, I guess next to the lab property is probably the most discussed park amenity, park related item that's been last year.
So when the lab property be a 2-for-1 then? Would the lab property be a 2-for-1?
I do talk about lab property.
No, my experience with Cedar Ridge is there's dogs.
There's dogs out there. The property that we talked about was, if you're familiar with the landmark behind the Dollar Tree, by Rotary Park, that's green space with the behind Aldi right back there.
I like that.
We talked about that spot. I'm not sure what happened.
It's probably still the #1
area,
top ranked, I guess, space for it, just because it already has natural trees. Space is large enough.
You want to pull up the area view? I know Tim will pull it up.
I was just going to say it is also one of those plots of land. It's as another example, not designated as parkland yet, but what does the city council want for this piece of land? So it's not undeveloped parkland per se. It's undeveloped.
So from a residential aspect though, is it mainly single family homes nearby it?
Just on the north edge, just on the north edge. And so we would come, there'd be an offset from that back of that so that we're not too close to them.
Here you go.
So this is over here is Rotary Park. This is Aldi and the Dollar Tree. This is Wheatland Road. So we're talking about this property here. So there are houses that back up to it on the north side. So what had been previously discussed by the board was that we would end the park, in the dog park around here to get that buffer for those homes. But all this would become a dog park, and then there's some parking down here in the corner or something.
And plus we have the parking lot.
And we have the parking lot over here.
When I first heard about that location and it being brought up that there were trees there, the good thing is that there's trees and that there's shade.
Right.
But the bad thing is that there's trees and the trees are in the way for the dogs to roam free. So are we going to be looking at preserving the trees and making sure we're not cutting
That's
those
something we
down?
always discuss, and if we get that out a little bit, if it's something that hopefully the board wanted to do for sure, yeah.
Well, and where there are lots of trees, oftentimes you will find a lack of ground cover, specifically grass, which dogs and grass and all that versus mud that could be, and a lot of times though the wear patterns can be very, dog parks can be challenging to manage because it can receive heavy wear, and you have to have another section that's available to shift to and let this recover while they're playing over here, and then swap it back and forth. So it's a lot more complicated than just having a large dog park and a small dog park to it.
So if that comes up, do we add that as still one of our 2022 goals is to find a trial location for a dog park? Because that's some of the things that the citizens wanted and one of our listeners.
I still think that's something that's high up there on the priority list.
Okay.
That's just my opinion. Right? Residents. I know we have former park board member.
Yes,
is definitely still interested.
So when you survey the residents, or I hear it's a high.
Yeah.
Was there service? My concern is usage. When you go and you develop this dog park, but then no one really uses it. Like, what area is most of the individuals who are saying I want a dog park living in? Which is why I asked about the single family home, right? Yeah. Because most of those individuals are using their backyards. Whereas if you're in the multi-family, you absolutely want a dog park, right? You want to be able to get out to a larger space. Yeah. So it does, I would be concerned about saying, yes, let's trial this area without actually having surveyed the community where they live. What is your zip code? Or what zone are you in before?
What's the other one? Quell Run.
Quell Run, that's over by-
There was the
over by
other one that
hospital.
was thrown up was Quell Run park for a dog park area. But I think we do need to make that a part of figuring out where we can trial for our 2022 goals. Because it's going to keep coming up, and we've yet to answer that or deliver to the community. We found it.
Quell Run is
Right.
early in the middle of the.
It's the one with the bench.
Yeah, that's the one that
Yes.
needs to be developed. As
It's the one- it's the one true undeveloped
That's our
park.
true undeveloped, that when we go back out to that community, they need and they've asked. And we said we do something because that is a huge underdeveloped park, which brings me to our next goal is I think we should talk about, we're gonna go back out and do visits to the parks again and listen to the community and what they want in their parks. So I think we should go back out. I'm not sure how many parks we missed last time, but I think we took the trailer out, had listening sessions, and people told us what they wanted. And it was a great turnout. This one in particular was a great turnout because it has 2 benches and that big old park. That's it.
They don't even face the park.
And they don't face the park.
I always, when I was growing up in passing, I thought it was a kite flying park.
You see people out there playing soccer, baseball. So if y'all agree that that could be one of our goals for 2020 is to go back out to the park and ask, survey the community on what they want in their parks. And then put on our plan to at least attempt to do something with Quell Run Park as our number one or another one. So I think that's a good goal if y'all agree to that. And then programming could come up, maybe Bart with Noel and programming for 2022 and what we want to talk about or bringing money into the Rex. I know Reggie was working on
There's
that.
been some ongoing discussion for the last few years about possibly doing a large community event. I think that could come up. So we're sort of playing the programming. The barbecue and blues is not coming back from the Lions Club, but something along those lines. I think it's been discussed for the last couple of years. Could the city take on something like that? I would discuss that. Must be discussed, as well as I think we also need to discuss at some point during the next year with the council of how we want to spend the additional dollars that we're saving at the current rate. So what are we going to do with that extra money? I know that we may need some to help with cost overruns, or because things have skyrocketed since the 2018 bond election. Costs have skyrocketed, so that's catching all of our projects, unfortunately, including park projects. So I'd like to address some of that with that money, but then there should be some significant dollars right up to that hopefully to do some other things in our parks. Number one, we've already talked about redoing the bathrooms there at Armstrong. That's been kind of number one item. But then after that, what do we want to do with those dollars? Do we make some improvements to the Quell Run? Do we want to address the dog park? I mean, how do we do that? What's that?
Pump track at Lakeside.
Pump tracks we talked about?
Yeah, it has. Do we talk about any of our accomplishments from last year? I'm sure I remember Sandy talking about those. So should I talk about? And I need to just think through them because then we get equipment at Pavern Park as one of the parks that we added equipment to. Speaking of that park, it did come up when I was at the meeting about the sign, and I heard the sign.
It's been ordered.
It's been ordered. That's what I was
not.
told. Councilman Cook said it was ordered. But one of the members did bring that up. They brought up trees related to that park and lights.
Additional lights?
At nighttime.
Not lights not working or like.
Because I know there are lights on the trail.
So I thought lights needed. They talked about lights needed and trees.
It is pretty dark there at night. Yeah, that's a particular spot, like just the park in general.
Fiber and Park. But again, when we go on our park tour, all of this will be very helpful that we'll plan in just a minute. But
Really cool.
we'll be on the bus. There was somebody out using the park equipment though, the exercise equipment in the park when I drove by Power Park actually yesterday. The guy was out there using the exercise equipment.
That's another thing I've heard here the last couple of months is people wanting more those types of amenities in our parks. The fitness type of equipment.
So that's one of our comments for the ARPA funds, right?
ARPA funds
was one of the ideas because part of the ARPA is
question. My background is, working with people with disabilities, and I'm always looking for, opportunities to truly include their community. Has there been any efforts to try to have programming set aside for people with disabilities, whether it be intellectual or mobility related? Do we have programming set aside? Has anybody come into the center to ask about programming? Those would be my questions for what are we going to do moving forward?
Yeah, that's a good question, but we've not had anybody come in and ask for any type of programming. But I know that we are, as part of the playground there in Armstrong Park, we did design that to be inclusive, with ramps and poured-in-place rubber to allow folks with mobility devices to get through the equipment, to get to play on as much as they can, as much as possible. 100% I don't believe, but it's a lot more than any of our other parks we currently have. As far as programming goes, we've not had that requested when we really thought about it, but perhaps we should. I don't know if that community, we haven't reached out to that community to find out what the needs are. So maybe that's something.
So do you want that as a potential just goal for 2020 for the board in general? Yes. Okay. That's not a bad idea. I think that we also, Bart, correct me if I'm wrong, decided to put play equipment to handle all types of kids in the park. And I think that with the council, of course, Harrington Park is going to come up and Armstrong Park. Are you going to? Is that going to be maybe with the joint council meeting? They'll probably ask about both of them. Where we are. Okay. Anything else y'all can think of? These are some good things. Anything else, Stephanie? I mean, anything you can think of for goals for 2022?
Busy in 22 as it is.
We are going to be busy. Things are finally coming to fruition. Oh, are they still there? Connie, can y'all hear? Can y'all hear us? So sorry.
Yes, you're loud and clear.
Okay, y'all have any goals for 2022 that we didn't add that y'all may want to explore?
No, I think y'all we've got to a good start on some goals, and then I think that the reviewing the accomplishments that we've done is a good look as well. So I think if we go ahead and maybe narrow it down or stop at those goals, we can actually accomplish those goals. And then maybe later in the year, if we've accomplished, say, 2 or 3 of them, we can add some more. But my thought is just kind of set us up for success with the number of goals that we have, and then go back, say, about 6 months or maybe 3 months, check the progress, see what we have accomplished, and then go from there. So, like I said, I think we're at a good start.
If I captured our 2020 goals right, and it's probably gonna help Angie, it's talking about our bikes and trails phase 2. Talk about programming, and that's large community events. I have exercise and health equipment, more of that in the parks, special programming potentially, and the dog park. Were those the top ones?
Did you quote one in particular?
Yeah, developing that part. So yes, that is a particular quote one.
Can I say something about the pump track when we're talking about the bike trails, or is that separate?
What you think?
Oh, you can do that.
No, I mean at the meeting.
Oh, in the meeting?
Yeah,
oh, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have goals for us to talk about, and for the meeting, I'll review the accomplishments with Bart and Tim on all the things I can think of, and Beth, and then I'll be ready to speak to that. Beth will speak to the trails, and then we'll
track. Beth, which park was that?
Lakeside seems pretty good. The smaller side across the street where the baby, where the little kids stuff is, and there's that, and all that at the top is empty where the parking lot is.
You're talking about the one across the street where the blue playground is, the bigger one across the street. Okay.
Yeah, east side.
Okay.
And it has a parking lot there.
It does have
Not the
parking lot,
greatest parking lot.
but it's one.
It's got 10 as
It's
well.
decent.
doesn't it?
Yeah, it's decent.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, just the surfacing, unraveling the gravel.
Yeah, of course.
There you go. Exactly.
So we need to schedule a park tour. Speaking of, so I'll go to agenda item number 7. We can schedule a park tour. I think that will help. It helps me and Beth so much and kind of learn about the parks and what we're talking about. So I think Tim or somebody's going to drive the bus around for us to view them. We just need to come up with a date in January. Anybody?
Okay.
What dates are off? Anything off limits in January?
In January, just the first week for me.
Yeah, that's, I mean, beyond the first New Year's week.
Beyond the week of the 3rd, so after the 10th. The 10th is a holiday. It's 17th is a holiday.
17th is the holiday.
17th is a holiday.
And we're still needing to do it on a Saturday. I presume we will. Correct people.
Yeah,
15th, 22nd, 29th.
Yeah, I don't have to.
We need to see them. Oh, your Saturday is full in the morning?
Yeah, Saturday.
Yeah, Saturday. February. All her Saturdays are booked in January. This is a busy person right here.
You would get, I mean, yeah.
Mhm.
Well, we can go up to 29. You just said no. I heard a.
You said a no for the
29
last
no.
weekend, January. That's the 29th.
Yeah, I heard
That's
a
a
no.
no.
Okay.
5th is a Super Bowl weekend. 12th.
Wait, let me ask you a
That's not
question.
that
Are we afraid that it's going to ice up on us? I mean, I'm scared of February. At this
Well,
point in my life.
listen. We all have a little PTSD. We do. It was very real. We just had a winter weather EOC meeting about it, so we're reliving it. But they are actually saying that we're going to be drier than normal, if they know what they're talking about, and warmer than normal
In February?
in February.
Really? Okay.
If the 29th works for everybody, I think I can make that work.
January 29th. How does everybody look? The 29th. 29th. Driver.
I'm good with the 29th of the
29th of January.
January.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. 29th going once. Carla?
And where are we going?
What park?
We're just
Park
going to
tour.
do a hit them all type deal.
Try to.
Okay.
At least the major
That's
ones.
cool.
Let's hit the
Yeah.
major ones first.
Yeah.
And the surprising ones that are parks.
Yeah.
At the end.
Maybe we can have the light coffee too.
Yeah. Yeah.
What time?
What time?
Oh, I have to start early.
8:30?
9:30.
Push it to
8:30,
8:30.
9 and then have lunch.
9.
Yeah.
Then we can have lunch.
We know a
It's
good
3
place
hours.
locally.
About 3 hours
Yeah.
and then have lunch.
It's gonna
You
take
said
some
you know
time.
a good place locally.
We go to lunch.
So I will be doing in January, on January 8th, I'll be doing a litter survey with my Keep Duncanville Beautiful board. And so we drive this route and we always end at lunch time, right at noonish. And as a way of thanking them for their time of that morning and going through that process, we go to Sabor La Mexicana, the tortilla factories, Mexican restaurant there. It's tradition. It's been that way for the last 5-6 years.
I met her on Saturday. She was so nice.
Marianne?
Yes.
Is it January 29th? What I heard?
That's I think that's what we heard.
So 9
We can go
a.m.
somewhere else.
9
We
a.m.
don't have to go there. We can go-
I thought you were gonna say that.
Yeah,
Italian place.
lunch.
Excuse me, everyone, I have to leave. If the 29th is the date, then I'm okay with that. Just let me know.
Okay, thank you for
9 a.m.
attending.
Thank you.
9 a.m.
9 a.m. to 5 p.m.
No. No. Okay.
So the other thing for the calendar, I just want to share with the board that city offices will be closed for the holidays on the 24th as well as the 27th. And then also January 3rd of the New Year's.
And the rec center will be closed as well on the 1st, as well as those.
And then, of course, January will be our
Campaign.
big campaign at the rec center for membership. So you get a year's membership at half price. So if you're not a member, that's a great time to add membership for you and family.
Okay. So our next meeting will be location when we partner
It's
with them.
most historically they've been at the senior center. And it is January 10th. Correct. January 10th.
So check when Andy sends out and make sure you look at the
I wouldn't be
location.
surprised if it starts at 6. Usually it starts at 6. So we'll make sure that that's prominently displayed on the agenda.
Yeah, where we'll be. We'll have our meeting first, and then they'll have their meeting afterwards. So we'll adjourn our meeting. They'll start their meeting, and then they'll.
So it's the other way around.
The other way.
Join meeting first.
Okay.
And then if we have anything for the agenda, then
Yes.
we'll go into hours. If not, then we'll just.
Yes.
Depends if we have anything for the agenda.
All right. Anything else? Thank you for staying. I'm at the meeting adjourned this week.
Nothing else?
Okay. So somebody.
I would like to make a move to adjourn.
All right. Meeting adjourned at 7:37. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.